I'm David Neal. You can find me on the Twitters at Reverent Geek, and we're here to talk about Kanban. And do you even Kanban, bro? So I'll start off by telling you a little story about my experience, my introduction to Agile software development. So around 2003 or so, I joined a startup company in the healthcare space, and we were doing data warehousing and analytics. You know, these large data sets of medical records and pharmacy records and so forth in the pharmacy space. And you could say that maybe we were doing big data before big data was cool. So we were the hipster big data guys as far as analytics and things go in healthcare. And being one of the first employees of this startup, I could pick whatever title I wanted. So that was one of my privileges. And so I was really excited to be the chief software architect. And being a small company, you have to juggle a lot of responsibilities, right? So you're doing a little bit of everything. You have to wear a whole lot of hats. And not all of that's, always fun. So not only was I a .NET developer in the early days of .NET, but I was also the database administrator. I was managing projects, and I was an Exchange administrator. I was doing hardware. I was doing networking and voice over IP and VPNs. I was the software developer plus IT department plus everything. And sadly, I was a SharePoint administrator. I don't put that on my resume, of course. And everything's always on fire, right? Everything's always on fire, but that's par for the course. That's what we expect. We've been in IT, most of us probably been in IT long enough that, that's the way things are, right? So confession, I was not doing such a great job of handling all those responsibilities, and I feel partly responsible for a couple of really good developers on my team that left the company because they just couldn't handle the stressful environment, and I don't blame them at all. I wouldn't want to work for me either during that period of my life. But we were growing as a company. We were trying hard not to fail as much, and we were partially succeeding. We were adding more and more customers and more employees. And right around this time, around 2007 maybe, I hired this young guy. We'll call him Chris because that was his name. And he was fresh out of Agile training, doing Scrum, and he had all these great ideas that he wanted to put into practice. He was doing some Scrum stuff at a previous company. He was big into lean and Agile practices, and he wore glasses, so you can trust a guy with glasses, right? And you can always trust a guy with a beard, right? And so right around this time also, we picked up a new client in pharmacy who was another startup company, and they wanted to leverage our expertise in analyzing large sets of data and and they had, some money to invest and things to do. So this was a great opportunity for Chris to get his, really dive into this Agile stuff. So one day we all got together, us in my company and the stakeholders, whatever you want to call them, from our customer, and Chris brought index cards and some Sharpie pens and Scotch tape, and I'm like, where is this going? And he instructed us to start writing down all the features and things that this customer would like to have. So we brainstormed and went through all the, their business plan and all that stuff that they wanted to do. And at the end of that exercise, we spread out all these, pie in the sky stuff across the table, and Chris, coached them through, figuring out what was the minimum set of features that they wanted to develop. It's like version 1 of their application. And this was an eye-opening experience for all of us, because not only was the customer, the company, all the people that were involved in that company, they all had a general idea of what they wanted to do with their company. They had a business plan and all that stuff. But this was like, wait a minute, they had to negotiate with each other and figure out what was considered the minimum set of features. What were the priorities, kind of thing. What was, what are we going to focus on? And it was really interesting to see that happen. And so Chris created, we had a big whiteboard in this conference room, and he drew on, some lines on the board and called it things like backlog, and which I'd never heard before. What? Log? And this blew my mind. So as soon as we had all those, prioritized list of features up on a board, backlog being like, where things, this is what we're going to start working on in our to-do, doing, and done type lanes. It was like a revelation to me. I could see right away, not only was this a clear communication of what we were going to work on, but, priorities and all that kind of stuff was just really evident. And over the coming weeks and months, that board became like a game. It's like, it was exciting to move those cards across the board and get that work done. You could see, at a glance, who was working on what and what things had been accomplished, and it felt great. For the first time, I felt like a dying man crawling through the desert that finds an oasis. This was like huge to me. And every couple of weeks, we'd all gather around the board. We learned more stuff, as we went along. We learned more stuff about the product that we were building and figuring out, what was good and what was bad. And this was awesome stuff. We were doing Agile. This Agile stuff was pretty awesome. So the benefits we saw in those early days were visualizing work, setting those clear priorities and expectations. The communication was great, and then the collaboration. It really helped that our customer was like, in the same building as us, so that we could get together and talk over, and they could help us get across hurdles and all that kind of stuff. So the collaboration was really awesome. So let's back up and talk about where some of these ideas come from. Toyota, back in the late 40s, did you know that Toyota didn't always make cars? I didn't. They were doing other things, but they decided they wanted to get into car manufacturing. And this was, after World War II, and they were starting to rebuild their industry, and they came to America as part of the, we were helping them to rebuild their economy. One of the interesting things that they analyzed when they came to America was our grocery stores and how grocery stores managed inventory, and how they were able to, like just-in-time replenishing of inventory, and how there were ways of signaling when there was more inventory that when things need to be restocked. Well, Toyota went on to just, blow the market away with how the quality of their cars, how their manufacturing process. They just really started to, that relatively small company that was taking on the giants of GM and Ford and so forth, and the amount of cars that they were producing was much, much smaller, but they were producing much better cars. And other manufacturing companies started to take notice, and like, wow, what are these guys doing? So they started to codify or analyze, come up with what are the practices that they're doing, and they came up with what's called the Toyota production system, and later was just kind of coined lean. So lean being lean manufacturing, lean principles, these things of like running a business with as few resources and as few impediments and wasteful activities and so forth. There are arguably two pillars of lean. There's this idea of continuous improvement, or Kaizen, and respect for people. Those two core principles of lean are expressed in lots of different things that encompass lean. But if you, as an organization, have those as your core principles, your processes, your employees are going to be much more empowered, and you're going to continuously improve the work that you're doing. This is what you want to see. So lean was, this idea of lean in manufacturing started to take off, and other industries started to take notice as well, including the software industry. So we find in the mid-90s that Scrum comes out. The guys who invented Scrum were taking those ideas directly from lean manufacturing papers. They were reading about what was going on in the lean manufacturing world and trying to apply those ideas to software development. And then we have extreme programming, and the Agile Manifesto came out in the early 2000s. And all these guys were coming from a manufacturing or manufacturing influenced backgrounds with these ideas of lean principles. There's a seminal book that came out in the mid-2000s called Lean Software, Tom and Mary Pompendike. And then in the late 2000s, David Anderson from Microsoft, Jim Benson, and some other guys came up with this idea of Kanban as a way of visualizing work and managing work for not just software, but for practically any kind of workflow. So you could say that lean is what birthed, all these other ideas. Another quick story. So how many of you are familiar with cargo cult? So the cargo cult is like during one instance would be like during World War II, and you got islands out in the Pacific, and military would come in and build bases, airstrips on these to be able to supply the military with supplies and inventory, and they would, the planes would come in, they would refuel, they'd take off, and the natives that lived on these islands had never had contact with the outside world before, and this was like strange new gods that had come to visit them. They were basically like aliens. These giant birds from the sky were delivering packages full of, invaluable resources to them. So they benefited, from this relationship. They would give them information or whatever, and the military would give them food and sugar. If you've never had sugar before, that's probably something unbelievable. But anyway, once the war was over and those military bases shut down and all the military left, the natives didn't understand what was really going on. They thought if they got out and built airstrips and built fake control towers and made headphones out of coconuts and bamboo sticks and got out there and went through all the motions, that they would get the same results. That the giant birds would deliver them, awesome stuff. And so the idea of this cargo cult is mimicking behavior without really understanding and hoping that you get the same results. And I think I know I have been guilty of doing this with agile development. I hear about some team being really successful and doing some kind of practice and thinking, man, if we do that, we'll be awesome too. We'll see all these benefits too. And you may get better than nothing results, but you might be frustrated that you're not seeing the kinds of productivity gains and benefits that the other teams are seeing because you don't really understand the underlying principles. So, what is Kanban? Well, in the manufacturing world, you can imagine an assembly line, and the way Toyota was doing these things is they were keeping a very limited amount of inventory at each station where they were building, putting parts on a particular, on the engine or whatever. And there were many reasons why they limited the supply of parts at each station. It has to do with being agile and being able to quickly change out from different models and all kinds of things. But what would happen is their inventory got low, they would pull a cord or press a button or something and raise a signal to let someone else know that they were ready for more parts. And Kanban loosely means signal card. It's a way of signaling that there's capacity or work to be done. And a Kanban board, or the Kanban method, is because we live in a what do you call it? The knowledge work. We're doing software. We're writing code. We're doing things. We're doing creative things that aren't always physically tangible. So we're not dealing with inventory of parts. We're dealing with inventory of modules, inventory of code, inventory of stuff that we build from a programming standpoint. And so Kanban is a way of making it tangible, making work tangible, seeing stuff on a physical board or a virtual whiteboard or something like that, having those cards that we can physically move, and that creates a special connection with the work that we do and how we do that work, how we manage it. There are lots of examples of a Kanban-like system in the real world. You can think of parking tickets, airline boarding passes. So a boarding pass has all the information on the front of that boarding pass that you need to go from place to place in an airport. It's like your credential or your set of instructions. It's got your gate number. It's got everything you need. So, and a sushi menu is kind of like that Kanban card that you hand off to your server. The server hands it off to, it goes through a workflow until you get your food. It's really important to know that Kanban itself is not a methodology. It doesn't tell you how you do your work. It's a way of managing the work that you do. So it's a way to better manage your process. The core principles of Kanban are: start with what you do right now. So this is, real simple. You don't change the way you work. You start with what you do, and then you use Kanban to pursue incremental evolutionary change. The 4 practices of Kanban are real easy. The first is visualize work. So we've seen that already. We've got a board and we got cards that represent tasks that we need to do. The next is focus on flow, the flow of our work, limiting our work in process, and then pursuing that continuous improvement. And all those kind of, it's like a pie that it's all together. But those are the 4 things to do Kanban right that we need to get the most benefit and value out of it that we need to focus on. So the first is visualize. Did you know that 40% of the nerve endings connected to your brain come from your retina? So there's 40% of the nerves come from visualization. That 90% of the data our brain receives is visual information. And our brains can process pictures 60,000 times faster and more efficiently than text. The idea that, we've heard the saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words, that's absolutely true. We can look at a picture and we can see at a glance all kinds of information. We can discern all kinds of things, context and inflection and the expressions on people's faces. There's instantly we recognize and can understand faces and so forth. So a Kanban board takes our work and turns it into visual information that we can process, and we can look at a board at a glance and know pretty much the state of everything and who's working on what and so forth. It takes our work and turns it into brain candy. Our brains love that kind of visualization, or brain bacon. I prefer bacon myself. So a card that's on a board can have information on it like the ID and a description of that task. It can have things like who's working on that task, indicators like that task is blocked, maybe some kind of estimation on that work or the significance of that work. And the colors are significant too. So one color might represent one type of work and another color might represent another. To further illustrate, this is a typical spreadsheet of project tasks that someone may use to manage their work. Now, unless you've been to seminary and know Greek language, you probably can't read any of this because it's been translated to Greek. Well, even if this was in English, you would have a hard time like sifting through everything and understanding the status and all that information. It's a lot for your brain to take in, and it causes a lot of cognitive stress. So this board is that exact same information that was in that spreadsheet, but represented visually. It's still in Greek, so you can't read the text that's on those cards, but you can tell pretty much at a glance where things are. How many things are waiting to be started, how many things are in process, how many things have been done. Things like red's bad, red bad, blue good, blockers, and you can see pictures of people's faces on the card or something like that. There's all these visual indicators of you can understand both status and context of the work that's going on. So, start with what you do right now. And that is a blank slide. Interesting. So, it's not blank on here. I love Macs, right? What's going on? They just work. The problem is this is a Microsoft product running on a Mac. Hang on, I'm sorry. Let me try to make sure I have my other stuff closed. Technical difficulties, stand by. All right. Hopefully we're good. So whatever your process is, that's where you want to start today. You want to start by visualizing whatever workflow you have. So if you have work that gets started, you have different teams that do that work. If it goes through like a dev and QA and then to production, that's what you want to set up and get started with. It's real important that you don't, when you first start to adopt Kanban, that you don't try to say, well, it'd be awesome if we had this step or if we did this. If that's not reality, don't set up your system that way, at least not to begin with, because you can't measure, stuff that's not reality. And the same goes for hiding steps. So if you hide steps in your process and aren't visualizing that, then you can't fix things. You can't measure those kinds of things when they become blockers, and you can't. They become like landmines for your team to stumble on. But as powerful as visualization is, if just getting index cards or using some software tool to visualize your work, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more to Kanban than just visualization of work. So the second practice is to focus on flow. In a relay race, you could have the best runners, but if the handoffs from one runner to another aren't working like they're supposed to, you lose the race, right? So there's this idea in Lean that you focus on the baton. You don't focus on the runners. You may have the best developers on your team, best workers in your company, but it's usually not the individual is the issue. It's the flow of work. You want to make sure that the handoffs from team to team or from person to person are what you're focused on to make sure that work gets done. You also want to look for what are the things that get in people's way. What are the things that are tripping people up that keep people from getting their work finished. Edward Demings, who is the brilliant statistician that helped Toyota in the early days and helped the Japanese economy, is quoted as saying, "A bad system will beat a good person every time." So as I said before, it's usually not the individual is the problem. The individual is just working under whatever environment they are in. It's really the process. And if you can improve the process, you've instantly helped your people perform better and feel better about their work and feel better about their job. Imagine that work is starts down here and finishes up here. That and the steps along the way are when that's incremental when progress is made on that. And this is time going across. If you look at the work in your process, this is typically what you find in most cases is that these are the steps when things are being done. These other areas are when it sits waiting for the next steps, for the next handoff, for the next team to take up that work and complete it. So we might be, this goes into the idea of why estimates are bad, but I don't want to get all into that. But imagine this is your development team, and this is your QA team, and this is your DevOps or your deploying to production. Your developers might be really, really good at estimating, the work that they do, but we hold them accountable for this entire thing. We say how long is it going to take for this work to be done? Well, it's a lot of things are out of our control, and we if we really look at how work flows through our system, there are a lot of wasteful activities and a lot of time wasted sitting. So in a Kanban, using the Kanban method, you can start to track when did this work actually start? If it's blocked, where was it blocked? How many days was it blocked? When was it actually? When was the work actually completed and in production? Or when did we deliver customer value? And then you can calculate things like lead times and so forth, and you can start to gather these metrics around cycle times and be able to identify what are the bottlenecks in your system. Where are things where are things getting blocked more often than not, and be able to say what's wrong with the handoffs between these two teams or whatever. So it's really important that we continue to hold discussions about like retrospectives and figure out what are the things that are standing in our way and are blocking us, and the reason. So the principle behind retrospectives is really important. Not the fact that you do retrospectives and do them religiously or something. It's really, why do we do retrospectives? We do them because they help us to improve our process and we should be getting better at the work that we do. Because the ultimate goal is to get work across the finish line. Whatever is in our way is waste, and then we should be focused on eliminating that waste. So we could have the very best developers working on our work. We could have an awesome team, but if we're not actually delivering working software or delivering value to our customers aren't going to be happy. The more we have going on, the less we're getting out the door, kind of thing, if we're not getting stuff out the door. But if we fix that, our customers will be happy, they'll give us piles of money, and we'll be happy, right? That's, delivering customer value is what's important. The next practice is limiting your work in process. It's typically in the Kanban community called WIP. So our society seems to be focused, fixated on this idea of multitasking. That you need to be a good multitasker. We take pride in being a good multitasker. We talk about we put it on our job descriptions that you must be a good multitasker. We really stink at multitasking. We're not as good at it as we think we are. We try to take on too much work. We really stink at getting that work done. Imagine a freeway that's operating like it's supposed to, with cars going at speed limit, and imagine that's your work that's flowing through a system. Well, and we have this idea in like project management that our employees, sometimes referred to as resources, which that's awful. We need to have them at 100% utilization. We need to have our consultants at 100% utilization. Well, what's a highway at 100% utilization? It is a parking lot. And that's what happens to us when we have too much work in process. When we're juggling so many things, and we're having to reprioritize, and we're constantly churning on the work that we're doing, we cannot get our work done. It just continues to add pain and frustration. And the thing is, our brains, it's a mental stress. When you go to a circus, one of the great acts is the lion tamer, right? It's really impressive. This guy gets in a cage with a giant lion and bosses that lion around, and that lion really could tear that guy apart in seconds flat. The guy has a whip, and we're real impressed with the Indiana Jones whip, but he also has a chair. What's the deal with the chair? The whip does absolutely nothing for the lion. The lion doesn't care about the whip. The lion, when you put that chair in the lion's face, lions have extreme powers of focus. And you have those 4 legs in the lion's face, he can't decide which of those 4 legs he needs to worry about, which one he needs to focus on. And the lion becomes paralyzed with indecision. And if the guy didn't have the chair, the lion would surely maul him, right? And we are pretty much the same way. When we have our plate is full of all these tasks, our brains can't stop thinking about, even though we may think we can, we may think, well, I'm going to shift focus, I'm going to stop working on this, I'm going to start working on this right here, I'm going to work on this for a while, and then I'm going to switch back. It doesn't work. Our brains can't stop thinking about, subconsciously, the work that we do. And so it becomes, like when you go to sleep at night and you can't, you wake up the next day and, you're like, oh, that was, you think of a solution while in your sleep because your brain is still working on that activity. And so it haunts our nightmares. So I didn't even have to try hard to draw a scary clown. I just drew a clown, right? So on our Kanban, on our board, we can start to identify bottlenecks in our system and say, well, this team is getting overloaded. Maybe we only have 3 developers on our team, and they've got all this work that's in process. Well, that's cognitive overload. That's stress on them, and it's not helping adding more work to their plate, right? So what we should find is if we set some policies that it's counterintuitive, but if we focus on less work, we actually get more done quick and faster. So we can, again, going back to that idea of flow, we can if we focus on one task at a time, we can get those things done out the door and at higher quality. and higher quality because we can start to experiment with things like, well, test is at capacity. They're at 3, right? And they can't take on any more work, and development can't take on any more work. So what we ought to see is it's a team effort. We ought to see develop what can we do to help our test team finish their work more efficiently or get this work done. So it becomes a team effort. That's what we ought to see, right? Another example of limiting work in process that a lot of software development teams will do is set an expedite lane across the top. That means it has a policy of 1 card, and if you put a card in there, that means everybody drop what you're doing and we need to fix this problem. So that's another way of just really limiting the amount of work that's being done. So what's the number one question your boss asks you besides, you want to see pictures of my houseboat? When's it going to be done, right? When's it going to be done? So we go back to our office and we get our trusted tool and we say, Magic 8 Ball, how long is it going to take me to get my work done? You know, how long is it going to take this project? Like, oh yeah, duh. I'll just pull a number out of my rear end, add 20%, and we're golden. And then your boss will add another 20%, and then his boss will add another 20%, and we just keep padding and padding. So we know where this is going, right? So Magic 8 Ball, am I going to get my work done on time? Yeah. So a Kanban system, as we're doing those practices, as we're focusing on flow, and as we're gathering our metrics on the blockers, and we're finding, and we're limiting our work in process, and what we should see over time is that our process will start to level out. That the way we do our work becomes much, much more predictable, and we can start to answer those tough questions of when can we get that work done, because we can statistically with confidence say, well, it's going to take us, the work that's on our board, it's going to take us X amount of days or X amount of weeks to complete that work, because we have refined our process to the point that we can confidently project those kinds of things. And there are statistic tools that can help us do that. There's a Monte Carlo simulator, and there's other things that can analyze your work history. And once you have these kind of metrics to determine, with statistical confidence, it's going to take us X amount of time to finish our work. And what we should find is that this Kanban becomes a cornerstone in our organization for continuous improvement. As our teams will, other teams start to take notice of, how these guys, able to crank out this kind of work, and how are they able to produce and get so much better at the work that they do. You can start to run, now that you're gathering metrics and you're doing things like limiting work in process, you can start to do experimentations, such as playing around with those work in process limits. Like I said, it's counterintuitive, but if we focus on less, we can actually get more done. So if we continue to, why not run an experiment for this next 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever? We're going to limit our work in process for this particular step in our work to, even less. What does that do? That causes other people to, causes more collaboration, right? It causes more focus. We may find that, the quality gets better, or we actually get more work done, even though, we're doing less work at a time. We can run those kinds of experiments and find out, and then have retrospectives and all those kind of things that actually make sense and improve our process. So what we're striving for with adopting something like Kanban is we want to see a cultural evolution. We want to see better communication and better collaboration. This idea of shared values and improving the quality of our work. what happens with a tire that's out of alignment? It wears out really, really fast, and has to be replaced often. We need to fix that issue. So a company that has that visibility, when you have that visibility that can be seen from the lowest worker in the chain all the way up through your organization, or however flat your hierarchy is, when you have that visibility across and being able to report on those kinds of things, then you can start to get better alignment across your entire organization, not just a particular team, but you can see things start to really take shape with being able to measure direct impact on decisions and those experiments and realigning things across your teams. So the core principles again are: start with what you do right now, pursue those incremental evolutionary change, and I always bring up that how do you, people say, well, how do you get started? I want to see those great benefits. Well, how do you eat the proverbial elephant? One bite at a time. So you can start small. We've got an excellent resource at my company. Most of the content that I've talked about here, plus a lot of practical exercises on how to get started with Kanban, how to map out all your tasks and start a board and do retrospectives, how to the right questions to ask, the kind of experiments to run, the arguments for limiting your work in process. We have this Kanban roadmap, and I have one physical copy. I didn't realize that I'd be giving this talk, or I would have brought more, but one of you is welcome to take this with you, or you can download the PDF from our website. And this is a really great guide. It's regardless if you use a physical board or use some software tool, this guide is great for getting started. You can start small. So there's a great book. Jim Benson wrote a book called Personal Kanban, where you can I want to just do my honey-do list, or I want to manage my kids' chores, or we moved from Tennessee to Georgia, and I had a board that had all the stuff that we had to do either before we moved or after we moved, and it made it really clear and helped us to stay on track with the task that we had. So, and even in your organization, you could start with the work that you do. And your coworkers are like, man, what are you doing? Or man, you're kicking my tail. What are you? You're so much more productive now. What's changed? Those kinds of things. And then your team, and it can grow across your organization. So Kanban isn't just for software development. It can be used to manage any kind of work. Case in point, this is a board that we have in our company that we use to order beef jerky. We love us some beef jerky at my company. A lot of us, this is how we fuel our addiction. So we have columns set up for each of the flavors of beef jerky, and we stick cards in there and assign that card to ourselves, and the card size is how many bags we want of that. And then at the end, when it comes time to order, we can just quickly tally all that up and make the order. Oh, so remember Chris, our Agile Superhero from way back when? Well, he's now my CEO. And at my company, we believe that people want to do their best work. And we're striving to provide tools and resources for people to do their best work. I absolutely love what we're doing and what I'm proud of our product. I'm not here to sell you on my product, but I think that Kanban itself, regardless if I work for this company or not, I would be evangelizing this kind of way to manage work to every developer, because it's made such a huge impact in my life. Now it's not a magic bullet. Kanban's not going to solve all your problems, but it is a way to manage your process, and it will help you to put out those fires more effectively. So here's what we're going to do, right? We're going to, starting Monday, here's your set list. You're going to visualize work. You're going to start focusing on flow, limiting your work in process, and pursuing continuous improvement. Start small, start with an experiment, start somewhere. But more importantly, be awesome. So take the things that you've learned this session, all the sessions that you've attended, whatever you can apply to your organization. Your employers will love you for being awesome, for taking initiative and putting these things you've learned in process. And with that, I am David Neal, and you can go to learn/Kanban and get our Kanban roadmap. And are there any questions? Start here.
So with the limit your width,
Mm-hmm.
that seemed like I framed that in my head as what's the top priority? Like what's the number one thing I need to work on right now?
Right.
So when you do that, I guess I fail to see from like the project management like why you would need to measure and be able to say like we're going to get this done
Yeah.
at a certain time, because it's either the top priority or it isn't. Like we need to work on this and get this
Right.
done.
So your brain's a funny thing. When this is your work queue that you're working on, and you have 10 things in that queue, that the one at the top is your priority, right? That's the one you should be working on. But these other things are going to mess your mind. They're still going to mess you up. It's like every time you look at your tasks, you're getting stressed because you're looking at all the other things that are coming down the pipe. It's like looking in the tunnel and the train's coming at you. So what the WIP is for is so your backlog isn't constrained. Your backlog is all the things that you're going to be doing. That's your input queue. It's going to have all the tasks, and it should be prioritized. So everything at the top is the highest priority. But as you pull those tasks across your board, and you're always pulling, you're not pushing things onto other people. That goes back to the respect for people and lean principles. You want to have a pull-based system, not a push system, because you want to respect their time and they empower them to make their own decisions, right? So when you pull that work into your current, your working queue, then that's what you can focus on. You can collapse, if you're using a software tool, you can collapse that backlog and just look at what you have. And I'm telling you, it's mental gymnastics, or it's like a game. It's like I want to get this. I want to focus on this. I want to get it done. And I want and again, it's counterintuitive, but you end up by focusing on fewer things, you end up getting more work done.
It seems like you would pull one thing off there. I mean, what you're saying makes sense, but like let me pull the most important thing off.
Yeah.
Get that done, and then I'll get the next thing.
Yeah.
I can do one thing.
As an individual, yes,
Yeah.
but as a team, you may have,
Okay.
you may have, say you have 3 developers, you may have a starting place would be 3 things in process, but maybe you want to do 2 things in process and force a couple of guys to collaborate and pair, that kind of stuff. Let's get this guy here first. Art, no, go ahead. Sorry.
Just to reinforce kind of what you said, we use this at work, and we kind of do a pretty good job of it. And one of the reasons you don't want too many things in your to-do is sometimes those things never make it. The 9th thing on your list, as you're working your way up, that might become, we decided not to do that, or
Yeah.
it's not relevant anymore. So it never gets into that space in your brain. If you never see it there, you're not then like what happened to it.
Yep.
It's like you said, your brain plays tricks. It's
Yep.
very important.
Yep.
Do you know enough about the Scrum process to speak to the differences between Scrum and Kanban? They seem very similar when you Scrum.
Yeah. So I've never done Scrum personally. My understanding of Scrum is that it's, you got time boxed sprints and so forth, and those activities can be really good activities for your team to do. I mean, if you're coming from some other like waterfall or whatever, that can be a really empowering way to get work done. So it's forcing you to start doing some of those lean principles of flow and but I think there are some activities in Scrum that a person who has come from Scrum to just pure Kanban would say some of those Scrum activities are wasteful. That the context or the I don't know that I can articulate it very well. There's a great book that came out recently, written by one of the guys on the Microsoft Xbox team, doing Agile with implementing Agile with Kanban or something like that, and they talk about how they've gone from Scrum-based teams to doing just pure Kanban, and what kind of impact that's made on the efficiency of their work by just doing you can think of it as like, well, you're just doing a continuous sprint, instead of time boxing and going through the mental gymnastics of, when you get to the end of the sprint, the stuff you didn't get done goes back, and it's like there's some overhead there that we could just eliminate if we just focus on just keeping the work flowing,
So with that, is there other questions? When do you do your retros then? You just, every 2 weeks you do one? Like in Scrum, it's at the end of an iteration, you do the retro.
Yeah. So we've experimented with lots of different activities, and this is where it's like the principle is what's important. How often you do it. It shouldn't be religious. It should be on demand. It should be do it when it makes sense. If it makes sense to like, hey guys, let's stop what we're doing right now and we call that stop the line. Like in manufacturing where you say we got an issue here. We need to stop the line and figure this out. So those kind of activities become on demand. Now we do have some things that we're experimenting with that we're doing. We call them. It comes from the construction world. Called pull planning, and they're kind of like it's all some of the same ideas. It's like planning for the next 6 weeks. What's the highest priority thing? We're getting our vision from our management, our founders, to say this is what, as a company, this is what we need to be focused on. Teams, you take this information and you decide how you need to set up your backlog or whatever to work over the next 6 weeks. So we kind of do it that way, but we don't. It's not a delivery cadence. We're not saying whatever you decide you're going to do, you're going to deliver it in 6 weeks, or you're in trouble. We're just saying this is the direction that we at right now. Whatever you need to do, get your workflow set up to start focusing on those things. Because we've struggled with that. A lot of us do come from a Scrum background, and we've struggled with, well, is it a delivery cadence? It's like, well, I got to get this done, and we're 6 weeks is almost up. And it's not it. It's not what's important. The important thing is getting it done right.
When it's like what you said, it was going to take you as long as it was going to take you, regardless. But now you've got this like, oh, I failed because it's not on time.
Yeah.
Even though it was never going to be on time.
Right. And so does that stress really help?
I hate that.
I don't think it does. For some people it is motivation, but I think it's it's diminishing. It's like it's not, in the long term, it's going to be detrimental. Yeah.
Do you have story points assigned to these stories, or do you try and keep them all about the same size, or are they just, one story is changing a word in a help document and another one is add a brand new tech stack structure?
We're in the camp that we don't do estimates. We're in the no estimate camp. So our goal is to break down work into what we feel like are manageable chunks.
What's manageable, like a week to get done, a day?
kind of up to the team, really. What they decide, what the team decides, how they want to manage their work, how granular. So we have like a card that maybe represent a feature, and inside that card is a drill down into a smaller Kanban board of tasks. And so as we're working on that, we're adding tasks as we discover them, right? So it's like some task up front, it's like, well, I know I got to do this, I know I got to implement this page, or I know I got to provide this information, but as you get into it, it's like, oh, well, now I know I need to do this and this and this. So you just keep adding tasks, and the parent card represents, will show anyone that's looking at it what the overall percentage is and what the overall percentage of being done is. And then there's all the metrics and things that roll up into our reporting that says, how much, what's the effort and all those things.
Yeah, at some point during your presentation, I think I saw something about where you could estimate how long to get something done based on the backlog, or how many
Yeah.
stories you've done in time.
So there's several tools out there, and some Kanban products that have statistical forecasting built in. Our product is one of them. So we, these typically use Monte Carlo simulator and some of the stuff that comes out of Troy McGinnis, to be able to, based on your history, predict with 75% confidence or 90% confidence how long it's going to take. And some of these tools will also give you the ability to play what if scenarios. So it goes through thousands of simulations to figure out how long is it going to take you to finish all the work that you have. And then you can play things with like limiting work in process, or what would happen if we added a member to this team? How much more time would it save us, or what kind of impact would that have on getting the work done? So it's a magical tool. I mean, it's really amazing. It's so magical that people don't believe it, but it works. All right. Well, thank you guys very much.